So we have to recognize people at all levels, and you could easily do it just writing a note and dropping it in their chair, but that wouldn't serve the organization. So we're serving the organization by standing in that circle and speaking the truth and saying, hey, I saw you do this. I appreciate you. Congratulations. So everybody on the team knows that that person is amazing. But if you're somebody who isn't high profile in the organization, you just became high profile, both in your own mind and with the entire team. It is so validating to get that.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we have a very special guest on the podcast. It is a gentleman that a friend of mine recommended me his book a few years back. I jumped into reading it and was just really impressed with the amount of care and compassion in creating an organizational culture that this gentleman has. And so really excited to talk to him. Without any further ado, we'd like to welcome the president and CEO of the Wichita Falls Chamber, Mr. Ron Kitchens. Welcome to the podcast, Ron.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, at least for me, reading someone's book and then getting to talk to them and ask them questions about it is that's gold. Because, hearing it from someone's mouth just adds credibility and just more context to what readers could expect from the book. If you don't mind, give us a little bit of your background. I know you've done a ton of things, as we said before, prior to the podcast. Hey, I've had a lot of titles and different things like that. So yeah, give the listeners a little bit of your background, and then we'll jump into some of the stuff that we're going to talk about around company culture and different things like that.
Awesome. So I grew up in the Ozark Mountains in a little teeny town, 2,300 people. Grew up in abject poverty. My mother's 15 years older than I am. My father's 16. My dad couldn't read or write. He suffered from the same form of dyslexia that I have. He just never learned to read or write. It was never poured into him how to do that. And because of that, the sign at work said, don't do this. He did it in an industrial plant and cost him his life. And so growing up poor, I knew that the people who had what I wanted all had one thing in common, and their families had jobs. And my family, we got a check from the government once a month, and he ran to the mailbox on a third of the month. My mom had no education. Neither of my parents attended high school. And so there wasn't much hope. And so I then, at a very young age, decided I wanted to be a job creator. So I went into convenience store business, and I thought I was going to employ my friends. Small town, nobody could come home after high school. And I thought I would employ them, and ended up with 14 locations and divisions, but ended up employing my friends' parents. And it struck me that I wasn't equipped to do that, to lead at that level. And so back down, we sold the businesses to individuals and who had worked for us, and then have been on this journey about what does it take to build great organizations that do amazing things, that equip people to change their own world, their families. And how can I do that and lead in communities and scale my passion? That there's one fewer child going to bed hungry tonight than there was yesterday. And the way we're going to do that, and I believe the greatest force for change is a job. Only job creators, only great empowered companies can do that. So that's my passion.
That is awesome. Thanks for sharing your story. What a remarkable journey. And I think it kind of goes along with kind of the first thing I'd like to ask you about, because I'm a huge believer in this as well. In the book, you talk about the concept of a curated life, writing down what are those things that you aim to do, planting them in your subconscious, if you will, in order to do that. Tell us a little bit about that philosophy. And obviously, you've set some big goals in your life. Tell us a little bit about kind of that philosophy and how it's worked for you.
I kind of looked at it when you come from poverty mentality in a background. When you talk to people, everybody's a victim. Everybody feels that their circumstances put them where they were. And in most cases, they're right, because they didn't know how to plan. They didn't know what the possibility was. I come from a very small place, And if it hadn't have been for the sport of rugby and me being pretty good at it and get me out into the world, I would have never seen the world and never known there was more out there. So when I look back, early in my life, when I was planning, here's the things I want to do. Here's what's important. I believe in faith and believe in prayer, but I also, as Jay-Z would say, I want to cast a vision for my own life. And so early on, it was more selfish things. I want to acquire this. I want to do this. I want to go to dinner at the White House. And I was invited to dinner at the White House. I chose going to my daughter's 5th grade father-daughter dance instead of dinner at the White House. It's only going to be one 5th grade daddy-daughter dance. There'll be chances at the White House. And if there's not, I had my shot and I made a decision. But that was the day or the time that I realized we're called to do something bigger. And having that and casting that vision and knowing what's important to you really is about giving yourself permission to have peace with what you want to achieve, not what Instagram tells you should be focused on, not what somebody else says is important for you. And in most cases, you're never a victim because you've decided what you want and what great looks like. And we're at the end of the year now, so I'm actively doing that. I have a 1 year, a 3 year, 5 year, and 10-year plan of what are those things. And when I look back, I achieve almost everything. And I just believe in structure and putting it out there. You can call it karma. You can call it a God thing. You can call it just good luck or good fortune. But you got to know what you want or you're never happy with what you got.
That is such a great point. We do exercise here at the end of the year. We've done it for, I think, 7 years now. It's a document called a vivid vision. And we basically write down in the future tense what we want the company to look like in 3 short years. And you're right. It's been one of those things where, it's not that you don't even all the time need to look at it every day. It's just you plan it in there of this vision and you look back and you're like, well, shoot, we accomplished all that stuff. This is pretty amazing.
It helps you eliminate things too. So one of my things a few years ago, I've always struggled with my weight. And one of those things was I wanted to be there at my granddaughter's high school graduation. My daughter's not even married yet, let alone has a baby. So I thought, I got to get healthy. And so I've got to eliminate things from my life that are a barrier to that outcome. From that point, I've lost a little more than 100 pounds. All my numbers of my annual physical are phenomenal. And it was all because I made a decision of what I wanted, not I wasn't going to get to do that because I'm a victim of my own bad decisions.
I think that's so powerful. I was just speaking this morning to our team and it was all around everybody can set big goals and focus on the result, but it's really the things that you have control over on a daily basis that are going to take you to those goals. One of the things that I wanted you to talk more about, because it's a concept that I've actually adopted from your book, is the 440 system. And I think that that's critical as we talk about these big dreams, big goals. They can sometimes be intimidating. How in the heck am I ever going to get there? Tell us a little bit about that system that you kind of developed and kind of the impact it had on some of the organizations that you ran.
It, goes back to that whole thing. How do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. But if you're as an organization, with a manageable number of people and you're setting goals for the organization, we've all been in that place where somebody set a goal for us, never communicated to us how we were going to achieve it, what our resources were, never checked back in. Maybe we get a 6-month review that says, hey, you're doing a terrible job. You feel frustrated. And so what do? You leave the organization. So for us, it was this idea of setting up, and we have a dashboard system. So we began the year with everything's at 0. Here's what we're hoping to achieve in that year. And then how do we divide it up amongst the people who are here? And everybody sits down and knows exactly what their outcomes are to be for the year. And they actually, as a team, bring those numbers to me and say, now to do this, we're going to need these resources, time, talent, and treasure to do it. And to understand that then every 2 weeks, those numbers go up on the dashboard and we know where we're at in real time. And sometimes it's, hey, why are we behind? Well, it's a timing issue. That's something that's heavily loaded in the fall, but we all understand where we're at. And the whole idea is to get to the end and cross the finish line. And we've got as many of those numbers, those boxes green as possible. But we're also talking about, are you working in your strengths? So we're a big believer in Gallup strengths. So we have everybody analyze on a monthly basis. Where are you on your strengths? And it's okay to be, and I say monthly basis, it's actually 40 days. We found monthly doesn't work because it's too soon. You get holidays that mess it up. So we use every 40 days. And where are you at? And it's okay to not be working in your strengths at 80%, for one period or maybe two. But if we're consistently seeing that, then we're underplaying your skills. We've got a first baseman playing in the outfield, and we need to adjust things and figure that out. We're also talking about what are the four big things, EOS, it would be what are your four big rocks that you're working on, and what resources do you need? Some of those will take a year or 2 years. Some of those are something we can get done in the next 90 days. But how do I support you on that? There's also a personal development plan. So what are you doing personally to develop you? And everybody's different. And we really did this out of, I have blinders on that I want more for people sometimes than they want for themselves. Because I can't ever imagine not being the point leader. I want to be there. I want to be in the meetings. I want to have the ball and cross the finish line. But some people don't. Or they're in a time period where, hey, Ron, we're going to have a baby and I'm going to focus on that. And that gives us 100% permission to have those discussions about where they're at in their lives so that we can move forward on that. And it's all self-reporting. So it isn't me doing accountability on you and, hey, you're behind. It's 100% self-defined, self-reporting. We signed a document at the beginning of the year about I was going to give you the resources to achieve the outcomes. Like a lot of leaders, sometimes there'll be new work that comes up and we'll have to adjust expectations based on new opportunities, but we can do it every 40 days. We're not waiting till some end of the year review that's meaningless. And what we've found is we've just accelerated engagement. When we do that, our team engagement levels are in the 90s based on Gallup's Q12 scoring. And so, with the average company in America in the 30s, it pays off for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on there. And, I think a lot of it, and I think you even said it, is just empowering people to be or to want more for themselves. I know you talked about meeting with the CEO of Ritz-Carlton at one point and the power of believing in empowerment and that people can see more and how you have to help them. Tell us a little bit more about what you've seen in your career as it relates to really the importance of empowerment when it comes to your people.
We can talk about this generation or that generation, but human nature is I want to win. I want to know what the rules are of winning. I want to know that I have the resources that give me the ability to compete, and I want to be trusted. And so by establishing that trust, and for us, it's a cultural dynamic and it's self-managed. We hear a lot. It's easy to follow great coaches. I'm reading Coach K's book again for the third or fourth time right now. But we know that great coaches coach the team and let the team manage each other's behavior and set what those expectations are. So for us, we have a meeting called the Daily Scrum. At the Ritz-Carlton, it's called the Stand Up. But, we'll gather together in the morning. This morning, I know there were 12 or 14 of us around it and talk about a different topic every day. Some of them are pure business. On Mondays, we share our schedules. It's so that we understand, one, the dynamics of somebody else's responsibilities. Two, three people don't show up at the same meeting. We understand how we utilize our time. We believe in an idea called leaving loudly. So if your kid's got a spelling bee, or right now for us, it's Christmas concerts, you're expected to say, I'm going to my daughter's Christmas concert. And nobody on the team is going to judge you. Everyone is going to celebrate you for making that commitment because we know you're committed to your outcomes because we see them every 2 weeks on the scoreboard. So by leaving loudly, we give each other permission. I did that. People go, well, he's the boss. He gets to do those things. If the administrative assistant does that, people go, oh, that's okay for all of us. And we all have different things. We have somebody who is a very ill parent right now, and she's in and out. And she's sharing that not for pity. She's sharing that because we lead loudly on our lives. On Tuesdays, it's always something that's a vision cast. So where are we going as an organization? What's important? What are the behaviors that attribute to the outcomes? Wednesday, we're looking at our scoreboard. Every other Wednesday, on the Wednesday, we're not looking at our scoreboard. We're learning something new. And right now, that's people teaching their job to the whole team. In 15 minutes, here's what I do. Here's what's important. And here, if you had to fill in for me for a day, here's where you'd want to spend your time. Thursdays are about book club or another learning opportunity. So we're readers, and we've always got a book that we're reading. We'll do 8 or 9 books a year, depending on how technical they are. So we're talking through where we're at on the book. And then Fridays, we have what we call star notes. And so they are this idea that people need to be validated and uplifted for the good work they do. And if you're in a big job, if you're in the insurance business and you're a producer, everybody in the organization celebrates you. But what if you're the person who answers the phone? And if you didn't answer the phone correctly when that client called, maybe it never gets to the producer. So we have to recognize people at all levels. And you could easily do it just writing a note and dropping it in their chair. But that wouldn't serve the organization. So we're serving the organization by standing in that circle and speaking the truth and saying, hey, I saw you do this. I appreciate you. Congratulations. So everybody on the team knows that that person is amazing. But if you're somebody who isn't high profile in the organization, you just became high profile, both in your own mind and with the entire team. It is so validating to get that. And people write important, meaningful messages. So Friday is this great day of celebration. And today we changed it up a little bit in that we had people also share their favorite Christmas memory. Because when you know how people came up and what's important to them, it's pretty hard to go, well, I'm not going to help that person when you know they have a sick kid at home, or when you know that Christmas was sad because we had somebody share that a parent died on Christmas. It's pretty hard to not be fully team engaged when you know people at that level.
Well, Ron, I can't thank you enough for sharing that stuff. I've written down about 4 things that we're gonna implement. That's really fantastic. I applaud you, and definitely stuff that I think listeners can take. I mean, all those are easy things. None of those cost money. It's just care and compassion, and making sure that your people feel appreciated. I know one of the things that I did here recently that sparked what you said is I was talking to our service technicians that are out in the field. And I asked them, I said, how many people do you think at this organization touch every individual service call that you run? And, they guessed, they didn't know, so not a big deal. And they were like, oh, it's probably 2 or 3 people. And I said, it's between 12 and 15 people here at the company that touch every single call. And to your point, are all 12 or 15 getting recognized for the part that they had in a successful call? And the answer is probably no, unless you're really proactive and really looking to do, something to celebrate them, for sure.
There's a famous story of JFK going to NASA when they're trying to get the moon launch done. And he walks up to a janitor and says, what do you do here? Well, he clearly knows the person's a janitor. And the person says, oh, I'm putting a man on the moon. That's the team members we need, who understand that they're about the outcome, not I'm answering the phone, is I'm the first person that has the privilege of talking to our customers. I'm the concierge that gets to quarterback where those opportunities go. And without me, the place grinds to a halt. And if we all understand that, man, it sure feels good to go home at the end of the day knowing you did something important. You didn't just answer the phones or clean the bathroom.
Yeah, that's a really powerful story for sure. You talked in the book about the impact that your mother-in-law had and that you didn't realize the impact that they particularly had. I did a session with our team today, this morning, all around influence and how achieving your goals is a lot of times you're going to need other people. And the best way to get other people to come along for the ride or help in the mission is to create influence. Tell me a little bit about kind of your the background on your mother-in-law, and then, how you've seen influence kind of impact your leadership journey and then others along the way as well.
Yeah. So my mother-in-law was, a rare person. And a lot of times you don't realize things about people until they're gone. And so this happened at her funeral, and it was well attended, but there were people we didn't know. And so I made a point to go up and introduce myself. The first person was a high school chemistry teacher when my brother-in-law was in high school at this urban, kind of cruddy high school. And my mother-in-law sat down with them and said, "You are too bright and brilliant to limit yourself here. You should go on. You should be a college professor." Didn't really think much about it. Didn't have a lifelong relationship. Maybe got a Christmas card every now and then. He comes to us and is now a professor at Harvard, teaching chemistry, teaching the brightest minds in the world. And he's in an urban school and thinks that's the best he's ever going to do. But because she cast that pearl into him, or that grain of sand, it became a pearl. Another lady said how my mother-in-law worked at a community college as a psychology advisor. Another lady says, I was struggling. I'm teaching part-time. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. She was then at the time the provost of the University of Denver, one of the most prestigious private colleges in America. And she said, "I wouldn't have got here without Maggie. Would not have happened." And we kept hearing that story over and over. And you begin then to look at your own life and go, what are we here for? I'm a big fan of Andy Stanley's. And Andy Stanley says, what if your job and your vision and mission is really to build next generation leaders, not put yourself in those key leadership roles? And I think that informs us. What if our job is to just build great companies that then exponentially grow in the next generation because we've empowered and built them? And I had a great boss. I worked for a guy named Jack Danforth, who was a United States Senator from Missouri. And, one of the things that he taught me that I think we've forgotten in this country, that the men and women that sit across the aisle, he's Republican, were some of his best friends were Democrats, because they believed in the same things. They believed in people. They believe in that. He said, we believe in 98% the same thing. Why are we fighting? And Jack's thing was, and he still does it regularly, will pour into former staffers. And, he's got people all over the country, like me, who he pours into. And that's what he believes his mission really is. And he was also U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He served 2 different presidents as a global trade envoy. It's a brilliant guy, and he's rich, so he could just do whatever he wanted. But instead, he's investing in next generation. And I think it's critical for all of us to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you saying that reminded me of it's critical in our lives to think about as we craft that future vision for ourselves is, our parents, obviously, they got to tell us that they believe in us. They got to say, hey, you can go do it. But, in my life, there's been a couple of people that weren't my parents, weren't related to me, didn't need to believe in me, but they saw something in me. They pulled me aside and said, hey, I think you can really do this. And to me, those are the people I think about all the time as, they didn't say it because I was going to do something and they were going to earn something out of it. They just felt compelled to influence somebody that was going to be, hopefully a next generation leader. So I think it's so powerful.
And for me, I think about that. My annual tradition is this time of year, at the end of the year, I look back at all the decisions that I made, that I can go through my calendar, what decisions I made this year. Where did I learn that? Who informed me? And then I sent him a thank you note, very specifically. And so, I had a high school football coach, a guy named Paul Skeens, and Paul clearly believed his mission was to create better leaders, not necessarily better football players. He was wildly successful as a football coach. He was the first person who came to me and said, you're a leader and leaders learn. And so here's a list of books you can check out from the library. And I want you to read these books on leadership. And I'm 16 years old. I'd never read a book that I wasn't assigned. Well, I probably have. But for him to do this, and he didn't do it for everybody. So I knew I was special. And he was pulling me up And so, he passed away just a few months ago. And so I wrote a letter to his sons just yesterday, telling them about how important their dad was. And here are decisions I made this year that because your dad poured into me 30 years ago, I knew how to make that decision. And I want to thank you and your family for that. And I've gotten letters like that, and I know they're powerful, but I don't do them for the person receiving them. I do it for me because, one, it keeps me humble, but it also reminds me, who am I informing? And how am I helping them make decisions today that are going to benefit me, but 30 years from now that are going to benefit somebody else?
That's so powerful. Yeah, the football coach thing. So I won't grab it, but I've got a note card that I've kept. I guess it'd be now probably 18, almost 20 years. I've kept this note card. And the note card was written to me by I was fortunate enough to play football in college, and my position coach. I was really struggling like the first week of college. You move into a thing, you're without the parents, you think that's pretty cool. And then you realize, oh, shoot, my parents aren't here. How am I going to go do all this stuff? And, you go to college, then you get on the bus and we go to camp and we do all this stuff. And, I think he could see that I was struggling a little bit with just like all of this change. I'm not one for, I like all my stuff. Here's where it is. And I know where I'm going. And, really out of your comfort zone. And I'll still have the note card. He wrote one to everybody, and on mine, it said, you need to start practicing like you're a starter on a top 25 football team. And from that point on, it was off to the races. And I still remind him about it. I've actually sent a photocopy of the card back to him and just said, hey, I still look at this and just realize the impact that you had. And I think that that's where leadership is so powerful, and believing in people is so powerful, because you're not just affecting one person. I mean, think about what your football coach, how many people he's impacted that he never even knew that you've led at your organizations and different stuff like that.
Absolutely. We worked with companies, more than 1,000 companies that have created tens of thousands of jobs. And I'm not sure that 16-year-old in poverty who owns 2 pair of jeans, 1 pair of shoes, and 3 shirts gets to where I'm at without him saying, this is who you are, and here's who I see you being, and here's what you need to get there.
I think an interesting point, I appreciate you sharing these personal stories, because I think they're super impactful, because we all have stories like that, right? You all can relate to different things like that. You also talk about a concept called Me Inc. And I think it kind of goes along with crafting that vision of who you want to become. Tell us a little bit about that concept. It resonates with me because one of our core values here at our company is lead yourself, because you can't lead anybody else until you lead yourself first. So tell us a little bit about that concept and kind of how you've implemented it within your businesses.
Yeah, I think it's that idea that we as leaders, as point leaders, if you're doing a great job, you're thinking about the company all the time. You're thinking about the organization and how you grow it and develop it. And it is pretty easy. And a lot of us do that. And we're very worried about becoming an ego-driven person that becomes all about them. And we start putting our own names on buildings, and we're always facilitating the meeting, and it's always about us. But the opposite of that is it's always about the organization. And then the next thing you know, you've put on 100 pounds. The next thing you know, you've quit educating yourself. I know you're involved with YPO. Some people would say, well, gosh, what a waste of time. He spends a day every month hanging out with they're probably smoking cigars in some back room, eating steak dinners. And they don't understand it's about you sharpening your saw so that you can be a better, if you will, and that's what comes out wrong, be a better tool to change the organization, but you're also becoming a better human because you're dealing with other people that are dealing with the same problems. And so we have to have time, which is why our 440s, we have that personal growth plan in there. What are you investing in that's you? What are you doing? It's okay to be a little selfish for yourself and to make sure that we know what's important. For me, one of those things is I got a haircut yesterday. And so it's on my calendar. I was going to get a haircut, and the whole team everybody could see my calendar. And I had a young new employee ask, why don't you just make that private? Nobody needs to know. And I said, they need to know that I go get a haircut during the day, and I need to do that because I don't have time on the weekends. I don't have time at night. I've got to invest in me, and it's okay if you invest in you. It was such a strange concept to him that, he started sharing with him. My dad said, you should never share anything with your employees. You should never do all that. It just struck me that we have to help people understand they have to take care of themselves, their families, have a plan for that. Otherwise, we're dealing with heart attacks, and we're dealing with people burnout, and we're dealing with all the maladies that come with it. And so I have a structured plan. My wife and I sit down this time of year, and we plan out every month. What's the important thing we are going to do as a couple every month of the year? Because if we don't, I will work every day of the month, that month. And the next thing we know, we're arguing over petty things because we didn't invest in our relationship. So I think it's critical to be a good leader. You've got to be a good person, and that's a holistic person.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that I've learned over the kind of my leadership journey is, when I first started out, it was trying to portray this person that was like, well, if anybody's going to follow me, like they need to know that I'm like 100%, all I do is work and I do this and that. And I think what I came to realize is that people can relate with you a lot more if you appear human. And yeah, I got to get the kids to school. And yeah, my son threw food all over the car and I got to get that cleaned out. All of these things, because at the end of the day, while you may be in charge, you may be the leader, you may be the point person, it takes everybody. I'm no more important than you are. I just do different things. I think that's critical when we think about leadership and, how we're positioning ourselves in front of our team, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the vulnerability of that, and that's for me, I didn't share for the first half or better of my career. I didn't share my background at all with people. I was embarrassed that I got teenage parents, that my dad was illiterate, that I suffered from dyslexia. Clearly I've overcome it, but it still pops up in certain ways. And, I didn't share these kind of calamities in my life that, I had an uncle who was mentally ill that I was very embarrassed by. And so I thought, if anybody finds out about this, it took me 8 years to get through college because we were poor, and I'm off running a company and going to school part-time, one class a semester, plugging along, embarrassed by those things until I began to share them and found out that, oh my God, other people could then. I became a human leader, and my impact and outcomes accelerated through the roof. And, I spoke the other day to a college football team, I guess 4 weeks ago, to a college football team getting ready to make a pretty significant run, getting ready for their bowl appearances. And I talked about dyslexia, where I came from, and had the biggest human being I've ever seen come up to me. And this guy was big and scary, covered in tattoos, crying because he never told anybody he can't read. He's a junior in college. He suffers from dyslexia and has never told anybody, and is struggling every day to get through those classes. And we walked to the position coach and said, hey, can we sit down and talk? And let me tell you about what this is and what resources are out there. And the coach went, I know exactly what to do. We have all this. Here's other players on the team. But unless somebody tells you it's okay to be vulnerable, you just don't know. And you're terrified of it being found out. And so, I've just decided to be completely open and vulnerable on that. Otherwise, I'm not being a great leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think to your point is, yeah, we spend a lot of time at work, but like people didn't show up to work to make you rich today. They showed up to work because they need to make a living, and everybody's going through things. And there's things that you can help people with, but you've got to talk and you've got to communicate. I think one of the things that we've struggled with as we've scaled is just, and it becomes harder. It's not, we're not saying that we've failed. We just got to try harder as we get bigger and more spread out and different things like that. But tell me about, as it relates to that, kind of the power of communication. Obviously, you talked about the morning meetings that you're having and how you're communicating with your people. But I guess maybe the the power of communication. And then if there's anything else that you guys are doing that could help others with facilitating that communication, uncovering that maybe someone has dyslexia and they've covered it up and you wonder why they're struggling. And you're like, wow, that guy just doesn't even figure it out. And it's like, oh my God, if I would have known, we could have figured this out. That would have been awesome. But you don't get that until you get those deeper conversations.
Yeah, I think for us, we're very structured around this. There's lots of measures you can do. We've been recognized as leading the best small business in America 3 different times by 3 different organizations. Our Gallup scores are through the roof. And that's 100% a function of communications. Because the other stuff you can do is lever pulling. You can give people money, you can schedule things, but communications is about talking about values. It isn't. Too many people think communications is about you showing up every morning, me giving you a 3x5 card to say, here's what you do today, report back to me. Well, that's communications, but it's not engagement. And so it's about engagement. One of the things we use is we don't have supervisors. We don't have bosses. Everybody has a mentor partner. And so, which may or may not be the person who's directly responsible for your performance. So you've got somebody to go to say, and we've defined for every role in the organization, here's what the expectations are of great is. Here's what you need to master to be promoted. Because all of us have been in a position that I have no idea what it takes to be promoted, except somebody has to quit or die, and there'll be a hole, and then I have a chance of filling it. We went to a consulting firm model that said, here's what mastery looks like at every level of the organization, and you self-report. So every 6 months, you have the ability to say, I believe I have mastered these things. You'll sit with your mentor partner who you've been talking to all along, and they'll either confirm that they think you've mastered it or not. But then it goes to the managing partners to say, we do think you have, and we're going to promote you. What that means is you have a better title, you have more money. The person who is, quote, supervising you or responsible for your outcomes, they may have the same exact title as you now. So title and money don't have anything to do with somebody dying or quitting. It's everything to do with how much value you're adding. But when you're talking about those things all the time, then I'm not worried that somebody's ever going to leave us because they can't get promoted. My daughter works in advertising in New York City. The only way you get promoted is you change companies. That's their industry. What a miserable strategy. It makes you never want to pour into people, and it makes you never treat people like an asset. They're always a cost. And so by communicating these expectations and opportunities, you're validating folks. And then by understanding that communications is like a big rubber bucket. We had a big rubber bucket hanging over our room, our boardroom. And the more water you pour into it, the more communications you pour into it, the more the bucket expands. And it has a leak in it. So you got to pour more into it because the human condition says, if you give me more communications, I need more. That's what scrolling is about on our phones, where we're just blindly scrolling things. It's more and more communications. Well, work is the same way. So we have to have structures that say we're going to have structured communications. We're going to communicate regularly. We're going to have open door policies, but knowing that you can never do enough on that for people to feel completely satiated. And so it can be frustrating because it's like, how much is too much? Well, there is not too much. People are hardwired to need more information. But the great thing is the more information you get them, the more fastened and attached they are to your organization.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great point. As far as what are you looking to build in your company? Are you looking to build the advertising agency that all you're concerned about is revenue and profit? Or are you looking to create an organization that has an impact on people's lives? I think that is, when you talk about getting critical, or when you ask someone, look, what's your why? It's a tough question because I think most people are ingrained to think it's just all results based, where at the end of the day, if you can build a company based on service to others and building leaders and things of that nature, to me, you create a stronger organization and a place that is going to make an impact far beyond the customers that you serve and you collect money from.
Yep. And I think as an individual, as leaders, we have to have a personal why. We have to understand why we do it, because we're not there to make somebody else rich. We're not there just to get a paycheck. If you're there just to get a paycheck, well, then go someplace else that's easier, that you don't have to be emotionally connected to. But we also need to understand what our organizational why is and make sure that they intersect, that they're not in conflict. And, for me, it clearly is, I want there to be more private sector jobs and companies to thrive so that they can employ more people, they can pay more folks. The world gets better when companies get stronger. And that's what I care about, because I want that to be one fewer hungry family on a nightly basis. I get to work in businesses that do that. And I'm not going to go into advertising because I don't want to sell chocolate bars or cell phones.
Well, that is awesome. I cannot thank you enough. I think of any podcast, I've got a full page of notes over here of things that I'm going to hopefully take back and implement in our company. And I think it's a perfect time, especially as we talk about the home services industry and the bulk of our listeners here. It's been a tougher year in 2023. This 2024, as we roll into it, could look a lot like it. And I think that, if you really want to arm yourself to be successful when times are tougher, it's building a stronger organization through culture and caring. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with? Is there a great way, if they want to get a hold of, I mentioned your book a number of times throughout this, if they want to get a hold of your resources or things that you're doing, where they can find you?
Yeah, so ronkitchens.com, ronkitchens.com. I am tickled to death to reach out to people, talk about it. As they say, you can get Uniquely You wherever books are sold. But, I really, particularly those folks that are struggling with, how do we go to the next level with people? Man, I'm passionate about that, and I'll do whatever I can to help them.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the time. This has been extremely rewarding for me, and I know the listeners as well. If you liked what you heard today, again, don't forget to leave us a review if you really liked the episode. I'd like to thank you for taking time to listen. I think that is the key. And I think what I'm going to do, and what I hope all listeners do, is think back from your past and find that person that believed in you and write them a letter. Don't email them. Don't do anything like that. Put pen to paper, put it in the mail, and send it to them. Again, there is no resource like someone who believes in you to move you forward. So again, as we always say, over-index in care and compassion for your people, build strong organizations, and ultimately you will find you can't stop the growth. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to get connected, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. As always, keep growing out there.